The views, comments, and opinions of the following program do not necessarily reflect those of Morris Media Studios, MorrisMediaLive.com, or its affiliates. Listener discretion is advised.
Coming at you all the way live. Welcome to Melanated Politics.
I'm from PG County. I'm David Harper from the DMV.
And from the east side of Compton, California, I'm Eric Clark. And as always, we look forward to bringing you local and national politics that affects the black community. Thank you so much for tuning in. Go ahead and call in at area code 323-293-3375. David, how was your weekend?
My weekend was really good. How was the last 2 weeks for you, man? We've been away. So how you been for the last 2 weeks? I ain't seen you in a while.
I've been excellent.
Beautiful.
All is well. Thank you for asking. What about yourself? All is well.
All is well. All is well. You know, paying bills, loving family, all that good stuff.
Yes, sir.
Trying to pay bills anyway.
Well, let's go ahead. All is well. It's good to hear. Well, let's get straight to it. The United States government shutdown is momentarily over. The Los Angeles teachers' school strike, it's now over as well. Okay. Also, Senators Kamala Harris and Cory Booker have announced their candidacy for the presidency of the United States of America. So let's see what happens with that. Later in the show, we will kick off some controversy, ladies and gentlemen. We will be talking about Dr. King's message of nonviolence. Was it detrimental to the black community? Dr. King is from Atlanta, as we all know. The Super Bowl in 2 days will be held in Atlanta, Georgia. So we'll be talking about both those things. But with regards to the politics of sports and how it all is entangled with the Super Bowl, what do you think about all that, David?
The politics of sports during this weekend of the Super Bowl, it's messy because you don't have honesty there.
Yes.
Right now, Colin Kaepernick doesn't have really support from the public the same way he should, but I can't get on the public for that because he really doesn't have support from the players the way he should. Roger Goodell, the commissioner of the NFL, Roger Goodell, had a press conference during the Super Bowl, a Super Bowl press day, where a reporter asked him, why isn't Colin Kaepernick playing? And his response was, if Colin Kaepernick could help a team win, he would be playing.
Wow.
And
seriously,
he said that with a straight face. This is so deep. He said it with a straight face. Now, here's the thing, and this is why this goes beyond football, the politics of it. Basically, Colin Kaepernick, even though he's taken a knee, he's brought issues to police brutality and violence to the black community. Basically, the way the black community has been treated for generations, he's brought that to the forefront. And Roger Goodell's response is that he's not qualified. And let me tell you why that's dangerous. Because any industry in America, it doesn't have to be the NFL. That's the motto for many black men, or many black people, but black men specifically because we're locked up so much or we're shot so much. We're not qualified. That's the most, I was going to use another word, but that's the most dishonest, stupid, I'm going to say an asinine thing to say for someone who is so qualified to play the game. Colin Kaepernick was a play away from winning a Super Bowl. And if you can have a quarterback like Mark Sanchez, who ran his face in the behind of a football player, being able to play football, he should be on the team. But the reason why he's not on the team is because he thinks for himself.
Well, let's get this out of the way. We absolutely stand in solidarity 100% with Colin Kaepernick.
Absolutely.
he's standing up for a cause.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I mean, this guy stood up for a cause. He brought awareness to police brutality. One thing they did not like is that he used his platform to bring this awareness about. And there was so much support he had. So many people jumped on board.
Yes.
I can recall a few Super Bowls ago when Richard Sherman, also from Compton, shout out to Richard Sherman, he had stated the double standard in hockey. So, they're really on the NFL, NBA, predominantly African Americans, and there's like this big pass. It's like a double standard when it comes to hockey. And the reason why I bring that up is because there's a cultural acceptance that goes along with hockey. It's a cultural acceptance. What do you think about that?
I absolutely agree with that. Hockey is a sport where,
as opposed to the standards NFL players are held by. Since we're on the Super Bowl,
you're right.
It's in 2 days.
You're right. In with the Super Bowl, particularly with NFL players, if NFL players fight each other, it's fine. When they fight each other, it's fine. You see off the field. I mean, when a play is over, they fight. When they'll jaw at each other, this, that, and the third. They don't mind NFL players.
It's not even a real fight when NBA players or sometimes
when the NBA players. Okay, if we want to be real about the difference let's be real. Okay. The NBA players, they fake fight on the court, but they have each other's back when it comes to getting a contract and getting guaranteed contracts.
Talk about it.
The NFL players will try to fight for real, take their head off, but when it comes to fighting for each other, they don't do it. Now, you and I had a conversation off camera. We talked about this, and we had to break it down ourselves. Like, why don't NFL brothers? Why don't they support each other? Why don't they have each other's backs? And some people say, well, they don't have guaranteed contracts. I say, well, hold up, wait a minute. The NBA had a lockout, a 1998-99 season. They weren't getting paid, and they had a short NBA season. But the reason why they had a short NBA season was because they didn't want to play until they got their contracts right. NFL won't do that. The black players in the NFL won't do that. So if they won't do that for themselves, they're not going to back Colin Kaepernick. And you and I had kind of a theory of this. Is it possibly because majority of the NBA players come from the inner city, but the majority of the NFL players are southern come from the South?
Okay, but let's look at the contrast. Okay, Trent Fredericks, hockey player, plays for the Boston Bruins. Mm-hmm. New player, rookie. He had a fight the other night. Okay, he had a fight the other night, and which was very peculiar about the fight. You can see the double standards. The reason why we brought this up when we're talking about the contrast is because when he had this fight with this other young man, the announcer was excited, the crowd was cheering, and get this part. His parents were actually giving high fives. They were giving high fives. And we were looking at it. We talked about it off camera. And when we actually saw it for ourselves, we were like, wow, let's go ahead and play that.
Just rock 'em, sock 'em, robots. Listen to the crowd at TD Garden. Bob and Gabe Frederick, his parents, not worried at all. A Wisconsin Badger with some bite. The kid was an alternate captain for a legendary program as a sophomore.
Well, after the hit by Kevin Miller, you just knew what was going to come. I mean, this was just going to be an all-out battle on this next shift right in front of the net.
Okay, right there, ladies and gentlemen, you saw the parents clapping, high-fiving their son, winning a fight.
Did you hear the announcer?
Yeah.
Did you listen to the crowd, how excited they were?
They were very excited. They were very, very excited.
See, that video represents a culture of acceptance of violence and payback and retribution in that particular culture, and is exemplified through hockey. That's why we played that. That's why we showed his parents. That's why we're emphasizing the announcers, how excited they were, and also the crowd.
And, kind of to piggyback on that, the culture in hockey, as far as accepting the fighting, the violence, hockey doesn't have a large percentage of black dudes in the game. Now it'd be fascinating if they have
there's
that same.
There's a few.
There's a few. No. There's a few. But imagine if, a good portion of black men decided, hey, I'm gonna learn how to ice skate. I'm gonna get in there. How would they feel about a black man beating up, the white counterparts? Like, how would they really, really feel about someone? Like, it was a good number. Now, think about it. If it was a good number of black men who were on ice that knew how to ice skate and decided, you know what, this is my one time. This is my one time. Why I could really take it to.
If you put 15 black men in hockey by Monday, by March the 1st, they'll ban fighting.
Okay, and really quick, I want
let me holler at you for a second.
I wanted to elaborate, because that last point we were talking about football players coming from the South and basketball players coming from the inner city. I want to say this because this goes to a larger point in this conversation. There are a lot of intelligent, strong-minded brothers that play football, but what's been shown since this whole Colin Kaepernick protest is that whatever it is that doesn't bond them, I don't want to say that they have fear in their heart, trepidation in their heart, whatever it is, they won't back each other up. But I think that's a reflection of, with the black community in general, why we don't stand for each other.
Well, Colin Kaepernick is not playing in the NFL because he's not good enough for the NFL. Colin Kaepernick is not playing in the NFL because the NFL is not good enough for him. That's the bottom line.
Yeah.
And it's also, let's just call it what it is. It's the new racism.
It is.
Anytime you stand up as a black man and you address issues that affect all of us as a whole. Now, see, if he was just walking around with if he was just on a very materialistic page and he was real braggadocious about that and he didn't make any stands that concerned the community he came from prior to him being an NFL star, it would absolutely be no problem. But the moment you stand up, it happens to be a big deal. And that's referred to as the new racism. It's sort of like telling people who address racism, you need to get over it. That's the new racism. It's sort of like someone saying, we live in a colorblind society. Knock it off. Are you kidding me? That's the new racism. It's all. I would also say it's sort of like, we have these videos out now. It's good we have social media, we have videos, things that's always happening. Now it's recorded. Whenever we see every night, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, anytime we see police brutality that's recorded on videos, and believe what your eyes see, not what people tell you, okay? What do they say? Well, did he have a record? What was his record? Why did he run? That is the new racism.
Or he had a hood on.
Oh, he had a hood on. That's new racism.
Absolutely. And when you have generally, going back to sports just real quick, because it's exactly what you're on this topic. When you had Donald Sterling, the former owner of the Los Angeles Clippers, on the phone talking about his girlfriend being with or sleeping with black men, or how he feels
they can't go to the games.
They can't go to the games. Well, he was sharing his opinion, and people can argue, well, how can he be racist because he has a whole bunch of black men on his payroll? But you saw NFL players band together saying, we're not going to play for him. Because they understand what the new racism is. I was not even going
to go here, but one thing Donald Sterling said, I'm not giving him any credit. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure you can imagine, based on the content I speak about from the heart, I'm not a big fan of Donald Sterling. However, he did say, he said, when Jews get money, Jews look out for Jews. When a lot of black folks get money, they don't look out for black folks.
They don't.
So through all that racism and all the things that he said that was just straight up obvious. I'm glad how the Clippers stood up and different NBA players and showed some solidarity.
It was the whole league.
But remember, he made that comment as well. Mm-hmm. And that's something else that needs to be addressed, and we'll talk about at a later point in time. But there is a new racism. Colin Kaepernick is not in the NFL because he stood up.
Right.
And now because of the Super Bowl that's going on in 2 days.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, who are you? I have the Rams. Who are you?
I'm not watching the Super Bowl. I'm not watching football at all. I thought about watching the game. And don't get me wrong, I have little cousins that play football. I grew up literally loving the game. I stopped watching the game once the concussion. Once I did a little bit more studies on the concussions and everything, I stopped watching it. And then when the Colin Kaepernick situation happened, I was just like, you know what? I'm really done, because now the owners are showing their true colors. The owners are shrewd, capitalists that don't care about anybody. But when it comes to black people, when it comes to black men in particular, they do, like what LeBron James said on his show, they do have a slave mentality, and they use a slave master mentality. And here's I'm on from the Atlantic. The Atlantic had an article really quick. The Atlantic had an article called "The White Flight from Football." The white flight from football. And in the 2017-2018 school year, 6.6%. Fewer high schoolers participated in 11 player tackle football from 2008 to 2009. But another survey showed 50,000 8th, 10th, and 12th graders. 8th, 10th, and 12th graders that play football, 44% of them were black, opposed to 29% who were white. Now, part of that has to do, and this is where it gets to the deeper issue in the black community, we still, as a community, look to football, which is understandable, as a way out. So we will brutalize ourselves. We will when racism happens, we will shut our mouths, because there was a wide receiver in Philadelphia that used the N-word, caught on video, but he was still on the team. But he was still on the team for the Philadelphia Eagles.
I remember.
And
at the rock concert.
At the rock concert.
Yeah,
so it goes to economics. It goes to economics. It goes to the social fabric of the black community and the history that we have. Like, can we leave this? Can we leave this situation? And with the Colin Kaepernick standing up, you have in uniformity, you have black men that may feel like what you're doing is right, but I can't risk it. I can't risk it.
You know what else I'm tired of? I'm tired of when people say, I don't want to talk about racism. It makes me feel uncomfortable. Well, as someone that's a so-called non-minority, that's a tricky word, because 75% of people on earth are not minorities, are people of color. But just for conversation's sake, okay, as they refer to as minorities in this particular country, okay, try living it. If it's hard to talk about it, try being me on your way here. And they look at you like, wow, should we deal with this stereotype or what? But, not talking about it is also the new racism, which also goes along with the reason why Colin Kaepernick is not in the NFL, which also goes to the other point that you made as far as what LeBron also said, that these new NFL owners, they have a slave master mentality. So if you're not willing to talk about what the problem is, how can we ever solve this problem, not only as an African-American community, as a black community, but as a nation as a whole? And there's one sister that I watch her, I pay attention to her. Her name is Renee Edo-Lodge. She's a wonderful sister. She grew up in England. She has a lot of white friends. And when she was on PBS, she actually was talking about how a lot of her white friends, they can talk about anything else. But when it comes to race, racial discrimination, police brutality, etc., they do not want to talk about that, or it's something they feel uncomfortable with. So, like I said, this is a sister I really pay attention to. She is great. She was on PBS. We don't have like a long version of that, but we have a small little sample. So let's go ahead and take a look at that.
As soon as I tried to raise the topic of race, there was an almost immediate clampdown, shutdown, denial from my conversation partner. They tried to find ways to convince me that absolutely no, race had nothing to do with it, that actually I had a chip on my shoulder, and that, why was I trying to make everything about race? I'd actually decided to have a conversation with a person who I can now confidently say probably is a white anti-racist, a white critical anti-racist. And I spoke to her about her journey, and I said, well, what's led to you being somebody who is so aware of how race shapes inequality? She said that a lot of her defensiveness initially when it came to these conversations about race was a fear of being wrong. A fear of, she said a lot of it was to do with her ego, a fear of being implicated in existing inequalities, a fear that she actually wasn't doing enough. I know that I have not spoken out in the past for fear of losing a job or losing a friend or losing a space in a house. I
love that video because this was a great example of a sister who is extremely intelligent, but more importantly, non-threatening, in the sense that she's not what a lot of white folks might call the stereotypical
I'm glad you brought
woman.
that up, because even though she's physically not threatening with respect to the stereotype,
yes,
the truth is always threatening.
Yes.
And she just said her associates were threatened with the truth. So that's the whole point of us showing that video. But to all good, well-intended Americans and people around the globe, 1 + 1 is 2. Translation: if you're not a part of the solution, you are by definition a part of the problem. And for black folks, we got to stop fighting fire with fire. You know what you fight fire with? You fight fire with water. So don't fight fire with fire. Fight fire with water.
Absolutely.
And hopefully we can make our nation, this nation, and the entire globe, which consists of 7.6 billion people, a better place to live. But we have to be honest. We have to be upfront. We have to put ourselves out there. We have to be part of the problem. Part of the solution as opposed to the problem. So being afraid to speak about something is the easy part. Living it is the difficult part, and that's why we have shows like Melanated Politics.
Let me ask you this. You just made a great point. What do you think is holding I can analyze what's holding the black community from banding together. I can analyze that and go to just the history of us in this country being on the plantations and how sometimes that mentality carries with us, the PTSD of it. But let me ask you this. Why don't you feel, and maybe you know the answer, maybe the answer is obvious, but why don't you feel like the percentage, because there's that percentage of the white population that's been, whether you're talking about back in the day with abolitionists, that's been down for black people from day one. Why aren't there more?
I have the perfect answer to that. Let me break it down like an improper fraction. Whenever you speak out against a power structure, there are consequences. White abolitionists were also killed. You know, there are white people now. When you see Charlottesville protest, there's good, well-intended white folk out there. Mm-hmm. There's been white folk a part of a lot of black movements in this country. When our sister, who we call Moses, Harriet Tubman, when she enabled slaves escaping during the Underground Railroad, a lot of times they wouldn't head in white folks' house.
Yes.
But had those white folks been caught, they would have suffered similar, or if not the same consequences as the runaway slaves. So whether it be not in 1619 when they say we first came, actually it was 1555. When slaves first came in 1555 and you tried to help, there were consequences. Whether it was in Jim Crow, there were consequences. After Reconstruction, there were consequences. Even now, if you stand up as a white American, there are consequences. So, you know, you can shed a tear when you see the death of our young brother Trayvon Martin or Sandra Bland, but if you're not out there, if you're not challenging the status quo, it's one thing to tell your racist uncle, don't say that at the dinner table. Barack Obama is an American. Hello. It's one thing to say that, but it's another thing to put yourself out there and be an ally and a voice, which there's been a lot, but just to put a cap on the answer to your question, there are consequences if you are white and you stand up against a power structure which has a history and still exists as systematic racism. There are consequences. But if you are black, there are consequences that may cost you your life, and in Colin Kaepernick's case, may cost you your job, your livelihood.
Okay, then here's another question to add to that one real quick, because I know we have a lot to talk about. Then what percentage, or what do you call the folks like what happened in the Women's March, how they separated, how you have the percentage of white Americans that say, hey, we want to talk about some of the racial issues, but not go deep.
First of all, look, we will not ever compare any movement to the suffrage and the genocide and the torture of black folk in America that came to this country as slaves, and were also indigenous to this country as black Native Americans. There's women's marches. I understand women couldn't vote for a while, but you know what? If you're a white woman, you were lying saying someone raped you and the person got lynched. It wasn't the other way around. So I think it's disrespect to those that have engaged in movements throughout the years to compare any movement to the black movement that still demands dignity in this country. But it's disrespectful, and it's also disingenuous. You know what it is? It's like piggybacking off black movements. And if you listen to these people, they'll say, you know what, well, In civil rights, they did this, so now we have to stand up because we're part of this community. In civil rights, Dr. King and these people, they stood up. That's what we're doing. We're shedding light. No, stop comparing your movement and get off the backs of black folks who build this country from free. We're out there because that's our movement. So you can never compare any movement to the movement that Africans, black folks in this country are still engaging in to this day, and also historically speaking. Bottom line. So stop playing.
So do you feel, in particular, especially with a lot of the politics that are talking today, because let me rewind for a second. A lot of people don't remember this, but back in the 2016 presidential election, especially during the primaries, people got on Hillary Clinton for pandering to black people, because one of the things she said really quick. One of the things she said was that white folks have to check their privilege.
I get that.
But real quick, people like to focus on, she didn't talk about economics.
I get
people,
that.
But she talked about race too much.
You see, we've been talking about Donald Trump on the show a lot and how he has lit the fire under people that already had an issue with so-called brown and blacks taking over this country numerically with respect to population. Mm-hmm. But check this out. Donald Trump was not the only one. Bill Clinton signed a crime bill. If you can recall, Hillary Clinton, she had a comment. I'm not quoting her specifically, but anyway, I'm paraphrasing. Hillary Clinton had a comment that went a little something like that. Blacks are super predators when describing an African American man.
Young black man.
So what is this? What is this by definition? Because I like to say by definition. We like to break things down like an improper fraction on Melanated Politics. What is that by definition? That is catering to the same crowd that Donald Trump is catering to now, that has always been there. And unless we come together and get some type of power, it will always be there.
I 1,000% agree with you. But let's put it all together. The Clinton years was the bookend to when Nixon got in. Because a lot of people don't realize this. Like, when they talk about the Clintons, I'm not the Clinton defender. I just want to state facts. They talk about the Clintons like they invented locking Negroes up, black people up, black men up. They didn't invent it. American politicians could not get elected unless you were quote unquote tough on crime, like what Nixon talked about. So when the Clintons came in, yes, they did it. I'm not refuting that. I'm expressing it. What I'm trying to say is when you have that element there, and you have politicians or people in the media that say, listen, if you talk about black issues too much, you're going to turn off white folks, or you're going to turn off the middle of the road that want to talk about economics, because I've had this conversation. What do you tell them?
Okay, well, look, when you're genuine, when you're sincere, okay, when you're loyal to your own craft, you stay loyal to your craft and your people. The Temptations made songs and make music for black folk. Everyone else disliked it. Same as Smokey Robinson. Same as the Jacksons. They made songs and music for black folk. Everyone buys their music. Bob Marley, Exodus, Movement of the People, War, that was for black folk. Go to a reggae concert right now where they're singing Bob Marley songs. Who you will see? A variety of different types of people. Now also, like we said earlier, the Super Bowl is in 2 days. Dr. Martin Luther King is from Atlanta, Georgia.
Right.
Martin Luther King we just celebrated as a nation Martin Luther King's birthday. There's been parade after parade. People are celebrating on television. But my question is this. Let's peel the scab off. Let's just go ahead and let's get straight to it. Was Martin Luther King's message of nonviolent, was it detrimental to black people in America? Yes or no?
No, it wasn't.
I say yes.
It wasn't. This way it's going to get good. It wasn't detrimental.
Okay, well, let me just say this to you. Martin Luther King is the most celebrated black man in history.
True.
Martin Luther King is the most famous, the most honored, the most respected man in U.S. history, correct?
True.
Martin Luther King is the most quoted black man ever. True. Am I correct?
True.
The question is, why? There's 900 streets named after Martin Luther King Jr. They're in over 600 cities. Let me just say this to you. Martin Luther King died for the progression of black people. I am looking at you live speaking. So he gets his full respect from me. Okay? I am just being straightforward and honest, and we're addressing things that black folks talk about in the barbershop, at home, in the streets, at college, at their specific occupations, etc. Let's just go ahead and keep it all the way real. Now, 600 streets were named after Martin Luther King. Why these streets weren't named after Marcus Garvey? Why some of these streets, or most of these streets, why weren't they named after Malcolm X? Why all these streets that were named after Martin Luther King Jr., why weren't they named after Harriet Tubman? Why? Let me say one more thing. Why aren't they named after Nat Turner? Why aren't some of these streets that are named after Martin Luther King, why aren't they named after Denmark Vesey, Gabriel Prosser? Let me just say this. The reason why is because for those of us that have studied these brothers, one thing that they fail to mention quite often is after the rebellion of Nate Turner, Gabriel Prosser, Denmark Vesey, if you were black and you mentioned the name of Nat Turner, you were executed and tortured on the spot for years. If you mentioned the name of Gabriel Prosser, you were executed and tortured on the spot. Same with Gabriel Prosser. Now, they're not putting these names up. We're not having parades and marches about Malcolm X and all these type of guys. Well, we do have Malcolm X parades, and there are streets named after Malcolm X. But I mean in the totality, with the magnitude of Martin Luther King, because we deal in symbolism in this country. Symbolism, there's always a message behind symbolism. So whenever you see Martin Luther King's name, or you see a street, or you see a parade, the reason why they always put money after that, because money towards that, and they support that all over the country, because there is a message: non-violence. If someone attacks you, do not attack back. And also, for just educational, historical purposes, Dr. Martin Luther King actually adopted that philosophy from Gandhi. Gandhi didn't even like black folks. So was nonviolence, was that message that Martin Luther King expressed over and over again, was it good for black people? Absolutely not.
Okay, I'm going to tell you why I disagree with you, and as much as I love you as my brother, you're wrong. The message of nonviolence was used to be a tool for us to get political power, because the only way we could make changes as a people was to get political power. So what Dr. King did, he saw the long game, because if you notice, after the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act, after those laws were passed, his tone, his vision changed a little bit. Dr. King got a little bit harder. He got a little bit more vocal from the standpoint of wanting more for black folks, but he didn't use the term nonviolence as much. He understood probably early on more than most, partly because he's from the South, partly because of his education, but partly because he's an observer of his opponent, that you can't get, black people could not get anywhere if we fought back, if we wanted long-term power. Okay, so what he did was he played the long game. He played the long game. Yes, seriously, he played the long game. Seriously, he played the long game, because you and I both know, as bad as it is right now, it would be a lot worse. A lot worse.
Am I living in a dream? What is going on today on a Friday? Listen, what I'm hearing right now, not only from Martin Luther King's the message that he supports nonviolence, there's the people that support that. What you just said. All of America. Listen, I have a question for you. Did God only tell black people that we need to turn the other cheek? Don't spit in my face and tell me it's raining. I will say that again. Did God only tell black folk to turn the other cheek? Do not spit in my face and tell me it's raining. Intellectually speaking, that cannot be true.
Listen, God didn't tell us to turn the other cheek. But
Martin Luther King did.
Martin Luther King wanted us to do that just for a period of time. Listen. It was he understood.
What? Before all the blood runs out your body?
No. So
before you stop breathing?
No. So we eventually could get a black president in that could do something about criminal justice reform. Because if this didn't happen, and let me just say this first and foremost, it is the long game. I'm not saying that it was perfect. All I'm trying to say, it was effective for what it did. We got the Civil Rights Act passed. Then right after that, he pushed for the Voting Rights Act. And once we were able to get political power.
And now we've done shows about gerrymandering.
Yes.
Okay, and we've done shows about voter suppression.
Right. We can go back and doing shows about the Electoral College and do shows about the Senate and all that.
If we leave here right now, we drive down, let's say Crenshaw or whatever, and it's a dead end, it's blocked off, do we keep running into that barrier or do we go around the corner and go another way? If you keep running to the dead end and there are no results, do you try another way or do you stick with that?
No. You try another way.
Now, you know who said it better than I can ever say it? One of the best individuals who ever talked about the contrast of violence and nonviolence, how it not only affected the black community, the Civil Rights March, and leading into the future, is El-Haj Malik Shabazz, otherwise known as masses as Malcolm X. And he was interviewed on See Black Power channel. It was a great interview. The way he breaks down the philosophy of nonviolence and this whole message of Martin Luther King is on point. Let's take a look.
I see. Well, Reverend Martin Luther King preaches a doctrine of nonviolent insistence upon the rights of the American Negro. What is your attitude toward this philosophy?
The white man pays Reverend Martin Luther King, subsidizes Reverend Martin Luther King, so that Reverend Martin Luther King can continue to teach the Negroes to be defenseless. That's what you mean by nonviolent. Be defenseless. Be defenseless in the face of one of the most cruel beasts that has ever taken the people into captivity. That's this American white man. And they have proved it throughout the country by the police dogs and the police clubs. 100 years ago, they used to put on a white sheet and use a bloodhound against Negroes. Today, they have taken off the white sheet and put on police uniforms. They've traded in the bloodhounds for police dogs, and they're still doing the same thing. And just as Uncle Tom, back during slavery, used to keep the Negroes from resisting the bloodhound or resisting the Ku Klux Klan by teaching them to love their enemy or pray for those who use them despitefully. Today, Martin Luther King is just a 20th century or modern Uncle Tom or a religious Uncle Tom who is doing the same thing today to keep Negroes defenseless in the face of attack that Uncle Tom did on the plantation to keep those Negroes defenseless in the face of the attacks of the Klan in that day.
I love that clip. And I love how you set it up, because you said El-Haj Malik Shabazz. That's beautiful, because that clip.
Is it beautiful?
It's beautiful. But hold on, let me finish. That clip was before he did his pilgrimage to Mecca.
Is it beautiful enough for you to go ahead and change one of these Martin Luther King parades to a Malcolm X parade? Was it that beautiful?
It was beautiful because it makes me want to add Malcolm X. It makes me want to add Harriet Tubman. It makes me want to add Medgar Evers. It makes me want to add Nat Turner. It makes me want to add Sojourner Truth. Okay, see, that's the problem, because we have to understand that they don't control this. We do.
Okay, let me stick to the point. All that turn the other cheek is dehumanizing to the psyche of black folk. It snatches out the soul and the spirit of black folk. That's what that nonviolent stuff does, as far as regarding the masses.
The nonviolence aspect to Dr. King's movement were for policies. But now the policies are in place. It doesn't mean that we don't fight back. It doesn't mean that there aren't consequences for crimes that happen to black people, as we see now in Chicago, as we see with the white girl down in Dallas who shot the brother in his apartment. There is consequences, but that change in policy started with the nonviolent movement. He didn't say for black people to be nonviolent your whole life when you're faced with obstacles. Well, he said we need to be nonviolent to get this policy going. That was a strategy, not a way of
if we walked out of the studio right now, peace to poetess and also Sheena, if we walked out of the studio right now and someone no disrespect, if someone slapped you, would you not slap him back and say, no, Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard is right around the corner. They just had a parade. Stop it.
Hey, look, only unless it's my mother, I'm not going to do nothing. If my mother or my Aunt Phyllis, there's nothing happening. But if it's somebody else, of course.
There goes the scab again. Let's peel it off. Let me talk about the message, the psychological detrimental message of Martin Luther King Jr., of nonviolence, because it's all about standing up for yourself, no matter how you can. I don't preach hurting anyone or taking anyone's life or anything like that. But I believe in you need to stand up for yourself and you need to stand up for your family, irregardless of the consequences. And sometimes you have to treat people how they treat you just in order to survive and go back home and be able to look your wife or your woman in the eyes as a man with dignity, and your son and your daughter will have a man to look up to. Now, this message of nonviolence, let me tell you how detrimental it was. The message of nonviolence for Martin Luther King was just as detrimental as gangbanging. Okay? The message of nonviolence by Martin Luther King was just as detrimental as black folks using the N-word. Okay, the message of nonviolence, okay, exacerbated by Martin Luther King Jr. It's a total setback. It's a waste of time. It's counterproductive. You know what? Slave master extraordinaire Willie Lynch would have been so proud of Martin Luther King Jr. He would have been proud of this man. Once again, did God only tell black folks to turn the other cheek? Don't spit on me, y'all, and tell me it's raining.
Okay, I'm not spitting, and it's not raining. So here's the thing. Let's go back to Malcolm for a second. Malcolm, after he went to Mecca, after he took his pilgrimage to Mecca, him and Dr. King saw more eye to eye. When he changed his name to he's still Malcolm X, but he did say he will be addressed as El Hajj Malik Shabazz. When he did that, he was more on accord. He was more on accord with Dr. King because he understood the mission, the long-term mission. And not saying what
Malcolm X
hold up, real quick. But as soon as you saw them coming together, even though they were two different brothers.
What happened to Martin Luther King?
Both of them were killed.
Okay, after Martin Luther King started having meetings with Malcolm X, and he realized that this turn the other cheek stuff was counterproductive. People didn't like Martin Luther King when he was alive. A lot of people called him a communist, a socialist, a traitor. Did they forgive Martin Luther King? Did they pray for him? No, he was killed. Now, also, what Malcolm X was talking about, and I wish my people would do, is stop using this forgiveness. Stop having a forgiveness contest when they kill one of us and using that like a badge of honor. Stop it, please. Stop it. Because you know what? They expect, because of that whole entire philosophy and mentality and how it's passed on through our psyche, generation after generation, not just through black folks, but white folks expect us to be, not some white folks, when you see how they call the cops on us, driving while black, barbecuing while black, moving in while black, getting an education while black. What happened to the 4 young sisters, what was that, yesterday?
It was yesterday.
While black. Okay, they expect black folks to be submissive due to this Martin Luther King philosophy that's been passed on that a lot of the black masses have unfortunately accepted. Why you don't think they like T.O., Terrell Owens? Why you don't think they don't like Barry Bonds? Why do you think there's so much controversy surrounded by LeBron James? Because they are not submissive. They're not a yes-em, boss-em type of guys. And that's what this has done. So,
I'm glad you mentioned that.
And also, it's like a bully in school. Mm-hmm. What happens to that bully in school if you don't fight back?
He's gonna keep bullying you.
What happens when you come across a dog and a dog sees fear? If a dog sees fear, that dog will attack. But if that dog sees you stand firm and stand up for yourself, just like a racist, most of them will just go ahead and get away. Now, also, to make another point, the former president of Venezuela called George W. Bush a devil, remember?
I do remember that.
Iran, they burn American flags and say death to America, right?
Yes, indeed.
North Korea, despite what Donald Trump tells us, they still are testing rockets that will reach the United States right now, just like that. Have they attacked any one of these countries? No, they have not. What do they have in common? They stood up and they stood out. That's an example.
I think the example of standing up and standing out can go both ways. I think a lot of people, particularly one of the reasons why Russian involvement, particularly in the U.S., is the way it is, because black people have stood up.
Yes.
And they're afraid of all that happening now. And see, I'm glad you mentioned T.O. and Barry Bonds, because you're talking about football.
The politics of sports.
The politics of sports. You're talking about baseball, but basketball is different because LeBron James is celebrating in basketball, but LeBron James is known and most respected athlete in the world. Part of that is because he does stand up. Part of that because he led the charge in saying, no, we're not going to play. Even though I don't play for the Clippers, I play for Cleveland. I'm not going to play another game in there as long as he is owner. That's standing up. That shows courage, but that also strikes fear into other people.
Do you believe in the higher power?
Absolutely.
Do you believe that the higher power created all these different creatures, not only creatures, but the land, the sky, the water, etc., ecosystems, natural habitats, etc.? Do you believe that?
Yes.
Unequivocally?
Yes.
With confidence?
Yes.
Okay. Why did God give snakes venom and a suffocation mechanism? Why did dog give cats claws? Why did he give dogs teeth? Okay. Why did God give eagles talents and sharp beaks? Because if you mess with their children, they're going to make sure by nature and through the power of God, who has given them defense mechanisms. Now, he's given us that as well. So if you do not fight back in the eyes of whether it be defeat, whether it be being outnumbered, whether it be for your own survival, for your own dignity, then you're not for God. You're going against God because you're going against your own nature that God put in you when you were a child.
But you also do have.
So one last thing, I don't mean to cut you off.
Go ahead.
So it all is entangled with the philosophy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Should black people? It all goes. Excuse me, brother. It all goes back to the philosophy of Martin Luther King Jr. Is it detrimental? Has it become detrimental? The message of nonviolence, has it been detrimental to black people as a whole with respect to the masses? That's a question we have been asking. Thank you for watching in. Right now, ladies and gentlemen, we have a call. We're about to take a call. Welcome to Melanated Politics. Thank you for calling in.
Oh, good afternoon. This is your brother Tim. How y'all doing?
Doing well, Tim. Good afternoon to you too, sir.
Hey, Tim, thank you for calling in to Melanated Politics. That's David. I'm Eric.
I love y'all show. Y'all got a good one going today, I see. Yes, you do. You know I got something to say about it.
Yes, indeed. Let's hear it. We love it.
Get straight to it.
As far as I believe what you said, David, about it was a method to the message.
Mm-hmm.
As far as the nonviolence. But the truth of the matter is you can't be nonviolent all the time and get anything accomplished. You just can't. You can't let somebody, you don't even teach your own kids to let people walk over you.
True.
So why should we as a whole people let any other race or any, just walk over us? Because that's what certain leaders did. But in their time, a lot of them were forced to do things because there was only, like I said before, there was only one way of doing things, their way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But you kind of have to fight for they always tell you, fight for what you believe in. You fight for what's right. You don't bow down for what's right. You don't not fight for what's right. You fight for what you believe in what's right. And our equality, our rights, the Panthers, the Panthers started the WIC programs and the school lunches and all of these things. They don't give them the credit for these things. They took that from us.
Hey, Tim, can I ask you a question?
So we have to fight these things in our possessions to let them know that we can be self-sufficient as a people. They treat us like we can't be self-sufficient as a people, and that's because we keep turning the other cheek. And
here's the thing, I agree with you, but let me ask you this. You just said it at the top of your statement. They let us. My opinion is that we allow it. We allow it. Like what you said, we tell our kids to defend ourselves. I tell my son, I'm like, don't allow. They're only going to give. They're only going to do what you allow. And I feel that's a big thing. That's pretty much been my point. It's not that I agree with everything that you said. And I agree with what Eric said, except for Dr. King's message, as you can see. But I guess my point as a people, and that's kind of piggybacking on the NFL, we don't have the unity to be like, we don't need their permission to put up a Malcolm X. There's a Malcolm X and Marcus Garvey Boulevard in Harlem. We don't need their permission to do that. We don't need that. We don't need a permission. Like, look, we're gonna have a Nat Turner holiday. We don't need a permission because we needed him.
Okay.
Just like we needed Dr. King.
Now I have a question for you, and thanks again for calling in, Tim. Now, as you saw on the show earlier, we had went over the fact that there's 900 streets named after Martin Luther King. Most of these streets are in the black community. Since Martin Luther King is so celebrated, why aren't they in other communities? And also, before I let you go, because we have to wrap it up in a minute, answer the bottom line question. Was Martin Luther King's message of nonviolence detrimental to the black community? And why aren't there streets in Beverly Hills and by the Hamptons in Pacific Palisades named Martin Luther King Jr. Street?
Oh, it's never going to be that, because now they're giving us what they feel we wanted. Like you said, he's the most talked about, most quoted black man, and he was the only one speaking at that time. He was the only one opposed to Malcolm X. He was the only one. Don't harm them. Don't do nothing to them. So, yeah, they're going to say, yeah, we'll give y'all the street. He's the one that tried to help us keep y'all down. Not saying that it kept her down, but that was their mission in promoting his means of peace. Turn the other cheek and they do. No, that's definitely not what we're supposed to do as a people. Mm-hmm. You know, like you said, you defend yourself. That's all. We've always been in defense mode. So we have to defend ourselves. Mm-hmm. And to turn the other, when there's downright injustices, that's like right now, we should be turning the other cheek with all of the killings and the racial profiling. We should just turn the other cheek and then put up a policy to make it better and think they're going to abide by it? No way. Okay,
we're going to thank you again for calling in. Your input was effective. We really appreciate that.
Thanks, Tim.
And just one more question. We're talking about the essence of turning the other cheek, and we made comparisons. We showed clips of the hockey of the young man that plays hockey for the Boston Bruins. We showed the clip of the young lady. Thank you so much for calling in again. My one question, my final question to you is, do you think that God only told black people to turn the other cheek?
No.
Okay.
We go. Bible that it says you're supposed to turn the other cheek, but no, that's not no, absolutely not.
Okay, we're gonna let you go. We're gonna let you go. Thanks again for calling in. Tune in next week for us, bro. We really appreciate that.
Thank you.
And just remember, the United States of America, they didn't turn the other cheek after 9/11. Thank you for calling.
All right.
Thanks, Tim. Oh, one thing I wanted to say. The other thing I wanted to say is that you're absolutely right. God didn't create black people to turn the other cheek, but God created us in reflection of Him, so He gave us other tools.
Yeah, I hear that, but
He gave us other tools.
Well, it's all different types of ethnicities and races and people with different backgrounds. Martin Luther King, I'm just saying, with this whole message, did God tell black people only to turn the other cheek? Because listen, like I told that brother just now, after 9/11, after thousands of Americans, good Americans, were unfortunately killed in the Twin Towers on 9/11, do you understand there was a lot of white Americans and others who signed up for the military to go kill women and children in Afghanistan and Iraq, and they're still there to this day, and they're still over there killing people in the name of revenge?
Even though it's the Saudis, but that's another conversation for another show.
So I'm talking about this message of nonviolence. Exemplified through Martin Luther King Jr. In my opinion, you say no, but in my opinion, it has been counterproductive with respect to the black community as a whole. And I believe that's one of the reasons why that we're not respected as a people in this country. I don't mean respected individually. I mean as a whole. And the reason why I said as a whole is because if you're rich, if you're poor, if you're middle class, if you're homeless, if you live in a mansion and you're black, we will all be judged the same in this particular time in American history. So we're all together, whether we accept it, reject it, but in the end, we will respect it.
You know, again, the message was for a tool. I think it's the onus is on us, for us, because he never said stay like that, especially after we got the Voting Rights Act, after we got the Civil Rights Act. And once we got political power, his message, His message was closer to Malcolm's in a lot of ways. You know what I mean? And if you look some of his later speeches, particularly in '68, he was talking about going to Congress, getting our money. It wasn't nonviolence. It was like, hey, we got this far, and we got to go further. It was a tool because where America is. And here's the thing. I'm glad you mentioned this. What's sad, and going back to the sports, and real quick, going back to Super Bowl, real quick, do you think Gladys Knight should be singing in the Super Bowl?
No.
Okay. All right. So going back to the sports, the difference.
Do you think she should?
No, I don't. How I feel about the NFL right now. I know I'm in the minority when it comes to black folks. I know we love football. It took me a while to wean myself off of football.
And a lot of black folks that are in the minority that think that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s message of nonviolence is appropriate and beneficial. I believe they're also in the minority. But go ahead, minority brother.
Well, from one minority brother to another minority brother. The thing is that as a people, and that's why this show is so important, we have to stick together.
Yes.
Because there's people that manipulate that message to not do nothing. And you see that in the NFL right now, live, today. You don't see it in the NBA because the NBA used that message to get a billionaire to give up his team. So you have that message of protest, nonviolence, of brothers who said, look, we're not doing this. And then you saw that message when it came to when it comes to their collective bargaining agreement, when I'm talking about the NBA, they said, look, we're going to stick together until we get the contracts right. But you don't see that in the NFL. You have strong, intelligent brothers not sticking together. And so it's hard for black people to stick together like that. I see what's going on. I see the symbolism. I know where a percentage of, whether they're rich white folks or the working class white folks that feel like black people should just shut up. We got our rights and we should play. Now there's that percentage, like you said, back in the day, that's always been with black people. I'm not talking about that percentage, but
okay.
Yeah, so I'm sorry. Sorry for the pause.
No, it's okay. I love it. Okay, also, I believe on October 17th, unfortunately, a white supremacist terrorist went into a synagogue in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and murdered 11 Jewish people. America. Did you see or hear any one of those Jewish brothers and sisters say they forgave the shooter? Have you ever heard a Jewish American say they forgive the guards or the Holocaust survivors who forgive the guards who work at a Nazi concentration camp? Never. Stop it. Don't spit in my face and tell me it's raining. We have a call, ladies and gentlemen. You are live on Melanated Politics. That's David and Amira.
Yes. We got short time for this call.
I didn't want to interrupt you because you sound great, but I actually just have a question. You guys are talking about the Super Bowl and talking about, the different sports and all that's great. But last Monday, a really fantastic woman, a black woman, decided she was going to announce her run for the presidency, and you guys haven't mentioned it. Does Kamala Harris make your, topics of the week at all?
Yes.
Why aren't you talking about her? I want to hear about Kamala. What do you have to say about her? Are you happy she's in? Corey, anything?
We're excited that Kamala Harris
is
entered the race. She entered the race last week. She got so much criticism. We're going to expand and expound on that a lot more next week. We wanted to give that the proper time and not mix this in. But we are definitely going to talk about her, talk about Cory Booker, talk about black women in politics, talking about the double standard and the triple standard when it comes to women of color in the space. We're going to talk about Stacey Abrams because she's going to have the response to Donald Trump. So you're going to see a lot of the conversation next week, but we wanted to give it its own space.
Yes, we will. And we're also going to continue to keep you posted on the local and national politics as it pertains to the success of the black community. Once again, support Melanated Politics by subscribing to Morris Media. For David Harper, I'm Eric Clark. This is Melanated Politics, where our gun will always be, where our tongue will be our gun and our ammunition will always be our wisdom. Peace.
Peace.
We're out.